So in the past hour, we had some information come out from Tom Silverstein about Jaire Alexander and the Packers. This has been a situation we've been keeping an eye on up to this point. Nothing has officially taken place. The Packers have not released Jaire yet. They have not traded him yet. He's still on the roster. But let me just read this. This is from a PackersNews.com article from Tom Silverstein. He says this earlier today. It's been nearly 3 months since the Green Bay Packers decided they would go into the 2025 season without Jaire Alexander. Yet here they are with the April 24th through 26th NFL draft staring them in the face, no closer to trading or releasing him than they were in early February. So first off, he mentions here 3 months since they decided to go into the 2025 season without him. I think he's referring, I assume, to one of the first reports he put out, or articles he put out in late February about Jaire. I found this as I was looking back to find where he talked about this, but I assume this is what he's talking about. If not, it sounds similar, but he says in an article from February 26th, a source familiar with the talks Tuesday between the Packers and Alexander's agent, John Thornton, said the Packers didn't rule out a return, but gave the impression they're moving on. The Packers didn't bother to ask for a pay cut because they know Alexander wouldn't accept it. So whoever this source was in late February who was familiar with these talks between the Packers and Alexander's agent, they got the impression that the Packers are moving on. So just important to bring that back up. Now going back to the article from today, continuing, he says, starting with the NFL scouting combine in Indianapolis in late February and continuing throughout college pro days around the country, Packers general manager Brian Gutekunst has been shopping Alexander to other personnel people, hoping he could coax a draft pick out of a willing trade partner. Not much has been revealed publicly about Gutekunst's attempts, but according to two league sources monitoring Alexander's situation, the Packers have received interest in a trade and remain committed to waiting for a deal to be made instead of cutting him. A source said the Packers appeared close to making a deal at the start of free agency, but the combination of the trade compensation and Alexander's unwillingness to cut his salary to fit the other team's salary cap have made it difficult to close a deal. There has been additional interest since the combine, but teams appear willing to wait until the Packers decide they are going to cut Alexander. And so there seemingly have been teams that are interested in making a trade, but the whole situation from compensation for the trade and Alexander's contract that they would have to bring on, which is about $17.5 million in base salary, have made it complicated. So we're still sort of sitting and waiting at this point. And he continues to say the difficult part for the Packers in trying to trade Alexander is that they must find a team willing to accept his $17.5 million salary and similar salary cap number, or get Alexander to negotiate a salary cut. Alexander has a considerable amount of leverage in deciding his future, given his high salary and cap number. If he refuses to renegotiate his contract with another team, the Packers are going to find it extremely difficult to deal him. So this brings me back to another article that had been written. I'm pretty sure it was by Dan Graziano sometime in the past couple months. There have been so many different reports that have come out. But he shared some information from different NFL executives who seem to believe that the Packers would eventually release him because a team would not be willing to trade for him. And I think the reason we're at this point with Jaire is because of his injury history. Looking at the past 4 years, only played in 4 games in 2021, 16 games in 2022, so basically a full season there, 7 games in 2023, and 7 games in 2024. And so if you're a team that's wanting to bring in Jaire, are you really willing to pay a guy $17.5 million when the past 2 years he has not played more than 7 games? That just doesn't sound like the wisest move if you're an organization. Because sure, if Jaire came and he played 14 games, 15 games or more, then I'd say he's worth $17.5 million. But if you don't know if he's going to be healthy and you're concerned with that, then you probably want him to come at a cheaper rate. But as Silverstein mentioned here, he doesn't have to renegotiate his deal. So I really just have the feeling that the Packers and Jaire are going to part ways. And I understand that the Packers don't save that much money by moving off of Jaire, close to $6 million on the 2025 cap if they move on before June 1st. It's closer to $17 million after June 1st. but that does mean there'd be a larger dead cap hit in 2026. But for me, I just think that when you look at the situation, the fact that Brian Gutekunst is actively shopping Jaire Alexander, I don't feel that Jaire would look at the situation, look that the Packers are actively trying to move on from him. They no longer want him on the team, or they would not be trying to trade him away. I just don't think that, Jaire would want to come back to a place where the Packers are trying to get rid of him, basically. And so I feel like they've sort of come to some kind of agreement that they understand they're going to part ways. I just don't think the Packers, even at his current salary and his current situation, want to have to go through another season where he could potentially deal with injuries and not play more than 7 games like he has played the past 2 years. I just feel like the Packers are at a point where they're willing to move on. And I think that's one of the reasons they brought in Nate Hobbs, because they full-on plan to move off of Jaire Alexander. Even if they can't trade him, I do think they're going to release him. Of course, there's a possibility he stays. I just have a feeling that they're ready to move on. I have a feeling that mutually they just want to part ways and say, it's been awesome having you here, but because of the injuries, we just feel like it's best to move on. So, sure, there's a chance he could stay. I feel like it's a super low chance. I'd say a few percent, 5% chance he stays in Green Bay. I just feel like they're ready to move on. And I do wonder, looking back at the history with the Packers and Jaire, when you look back to a couple seasons ago, when he got suspended and there seemed to be some other issues there, it seemed that things had gotten better moving forward. It's always hard to know what's going on. We don't have a eye in the locker room of exactly what's going on, but I do wonder if, that affected anything going forward. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but I do wonder about that. But I just think, as I said, because Gutekunst is trying to trade him, do I think Jaire wants to come back? I don't know about it, and it does feel like they're just going to have to release him, potentially, unless a team comes in the last second and says, hey, we'll give you a 5th-round pick, 6th-round pick. I just think because of his salary, that's where it makes it complicated, where when you have a guy who has dealt with so many injuries, I see why teams are hesitant to trade for him because of his $17.5 million salary, and you don't know how much he's going to play. We'll sort of see what happens moving forward, but I think the Packers are set at cornerback even without Jaire. I think they're good enough with the guys they have on there: Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, Nate Hobbs, Javon Bullard. Now, is that a perfect room? No, but I think it's good enough for the Packers to be solid. And if Jaire does go, we could see the Packers draft corner in the first few rounds. But I think we saw in the game against the Eagles, the Packers secondary played pretty good, and that was with Carrington Valentine and Keyshawn Nixon on the outside. Now you have Nate Hobbs as well. So I'm not too concerned with the corner room, even without Jaire Alexander, even though I do think it could make sense to add another piece there in the draft. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment section down below. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe. And if you want to follow me on Twitter/X, I post there occasionally at LukeBeller3. But I appreciate you guys watching as always, and I'll see you guys next time.